Hello, my name is Clarita and I love learning about holistic health and natural healing. I've been dealing with some major health issues the past few years that led me to explore different causations and healing modalities and concluded that my IUD may have been a major culprit in my health deteriorating. If you clicked on this video and you're searching for information prior to getting an IUD, or you have it and you're looking for confirmation whether what you're experiencing in terms of symptoms or side effects is common, welcome. So first, what is an IUD? An IUD is a contraceptive device that's inserted into the uterus, and depending if you have the hormonal or the copper, will have different effects on your body. The hormonal IUD thickens the mucus in the cervix to prevent sperm from reaching the egg. It can thin the lining of the uterus to prevent the egg from implanting, or it can also prevent ovulation, whereas the copper IUD produces an inflammatory response that's toxic to both the egg and the sperm. It changes the composition of the cells and uterine fluid and basically repels sperm by making the uterus inhospitable to both the sperm and the egg. So before I continue, I'd like to insert a caveat and mention that anything I say is my opinion based solely on my experience, which I'm sharing to spread awareness of some lesser known or advertised side effects so you can have a more well-rounded knowledge to make an informed and consenting decision whether it's right for you or not. I am by no means telling you what to do with your body. What you feel is right for you is solely your decision. What I'm sharing is based on what I wish I had known prior to going through and getting the IUD. And having had a horrible experience, I'm a little biased. So here's a little bit of history. I started birth control to help with my acne when I was in high school. I was on the pill for about 8 or 9 years without any issues to note of. It was to my knowledge that it would help regulate my hormones, which in turn will clear my acne. I feel like it did help clear my skin, but I also did some topical treatment at the time, so I feel like that kind of helped it. And whether to attribute my chest getting bigger from that or genetics, we'll never know. I did also experience depression and mood swings here and there, but that coupled with trauma I was going through at the time, I just chalked it up to my inability to deal with some challenges. So by my late 20s, I started caring more about my health and what I put into my body, and I decided to switch my pills for the hormonal IUD. I was informed that it was much better for you because instead of it affecting your whole body, it targets one specific area. So as far as the insertion and removal goes, both the copper and hormonal IUD were manageable. There was of course some discomfort, but with both of them I did experience cramping and contractions. I do have to say that the copper one was a little bit worse because as soon as I got home, I had to lay in bed for a bit and just kind of wait for the cramping to subside. Now for the hormonal IUD, I had it in for about 8 months, and like I said, I thought it would be better for me because it targets one specific area, and I thought that's one less thing that my body had to deal with. I also wouldn't have to remember to take my pills every day, and the upside on top of not getting pregnant was that I wouldn't get my period, which I now know is not normal, and I had to dig a little deeper as to why I vilified getting my monthly menses. So after a few months, I started experiencing major anxiety and I couldn't really pinpoint where it was coming from. And then I started getting cystic acne really bad on my face. So I did a lifestyle change because I thought that was what was causing it, and I eliminated dairy, eggs, and meat. And I also reduced my consumption of oil, salt, and sugar. And then I guess it did help a little bit, but every couple of weeks I would get a breakout. And then I couldn't really shake the feeling of something being off and that there had to be more to this. So yeah, I just kind of woke up one day and thought that maybe the IUD had something to do with it. So I looked it up, and there were a lot of people who were experiencing what I was experiencing. And that right then I decided to have it removed. I didn't have to worry about birth control because I wasn't seeing anyone at the time, so I felt happy with my decision. And I also had quit drinking alcohol, and I knew that I wouldn't have any impaired judgments. So that break lasted about 2 years before I met my current partner. Enter the copper IUD. And the whole reason I decided to get the copper IUD was because I was told it was non-hormonal and that it was safe. And really at the time it was either that or the stress after each intercourse of potentially getting pregnant up until I got my period. I didn't want to go back into the pill because I didn't want artificial hormones inside me. So I consulted with a nurse, and she said that the copper IUD was great because it was non-hormonal, and all it does was release trace amounts of copper into my uterus and essentially make me inhospitable to sperm. And she did give me a warning that my flow might be a little bit heavier and I might have a lot more severe cramps. I went ahead with it because I felt like my flow was already pretty good and I pretty much had non-existent cramping. So January 2021, I had the IUD inserted, and at the beginning my flow did become heavier and would last a full week, but it's tapered off now to only lasting 4 days. And I did get severe cramping, mostly at the beginning, but it's pretty much non-existent now. I didn't have anything to note in terms of my complexion. My skin stayed relatively clear until a week or so before my period would start. I'd have minor breakouts, but definitely not like before. And I do honestly think that it's because of my dietary changes that I kept up with, and most importantly, no pregnancy stress or scares. This is where my story takes a turn because all of the stuff that I was experiencing was so gradual that it took me 2 years to even consider the idea that my IUD was causing all of my health issues. Everything was great up until the fall. I went from having a lot of energy and being super active. I would go on runs. I would go on 5 to 8 hour hikes or go rock climbing 4 times out of the week, to now having to peel myself out of bed and force myself to go to work and having really low energy. I oscillated between feeling numb or feeling depressed. I was exhausted all the time and I felt apathetic about everything. I thought I was burnt out because just the idea of leaving the house drained me, and my anxiety went through the roof. And I developed social anxiety because I would just dissociate or check out all the time. My brain fog was really severe that sometimes having conversation was really hard for me, and I would have a hard time remembering things. And of course, being in a pandemic didn't really help with any of that. So I kind of just leaned into being introverted. And me accepting that was a bit of a blessing because it did allow me to be okay with setting boundaries based on my energy level, and I pretty much had a shift in personality and lifestyle. I essentially developed an allergy to the cold because it would take me so long to get my temperature back up once we get inside. Sometimes I would have to take a hot shower or a really long bath just to stop shivering. My sleep was off because I would wake up so anxious and I would have like these heart palpitations and no idea why they were happening. My boyfriend and I figured that maybe I just needed a vacation. So end of May, beginning of June 2022, we went to Mexico, and when we returned, I ended up getting sick and noticed some strange symptoms. So I went to the doctor for my headache and body ache. I felt like my whole body was sunburnt, and it definitely wasn't from Mexico because it rained pretty much the whole time we were there. But yeah, he diagnosed me with fibromyalgia, and I mean, at least I had an answer for the chronic fatigue, but it left me with more questions, really. And sure, I had a name for an illness, but there's no causation associated with it. And I felt like this diagnosis was a life sentence. And all of that led me to do some research and found some correlation of symptoms with having high amounts of heavy metals in my system. So I decided to try a heavy metal detox, and around that time I developed tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears, and it hasn't subsided, and it's been about 4 months now since that started. I've been down to working 2 to 3 days out of the week because of my energy levels, and I knew there had to be more to this when I had been doing the heavy metal detox for 3 months and I didn't feel any better. A few weeks ago, I had a thought that maybe I didn't know everything I needed to know about the copper IUD, so I did a little bit of digging and I found countless Facebook groups and accounts of people's stories and symptoms similar to mine, and that's when I learned about copper toxicity. There are literally Facebook groups of thousands of women who are seeking support from this. And it is baffling that I felt like this wasn't disclosed at any of my appointments prior to getting the copper IUD. So when I'm reading through these Facebook groups, a lot of the women on there were talking about copper toxicity and being diagnosed with Hashimoto's as well. And I looked it up, and a lot of those symptoms were similar to fibromyalgia. And on top of all those symptoms, I noticed that I had become drier down there to the point of it hurting while we were doing it. I also noticed that I didn't really like how my cervical fluid was smelling. So a contraception that I took in order for me to have as much as I wanted made me not want to do it, which is kind of messed up. Do you know what I learned about excess copper in our body? That it actually raises estrogen levels and fights for the absorption of zinc. Now, copper isn't necessarily bad. We actually need bioavailable copper in our body that we get from the food that we eat. But the copper IUD is not bioavailable, meaning that our body can't absorb and use it, hence why it causes an inflammatory response. And as much as they advertise that it's non-hormonal, it still affects our hormone levels because it raises estrogen. So why did I make this video? Because I want to impart the very hard lesson that I learned through all this. I thought that if I did enough self-care things, ate well, I slept and exercised, that I would heal from this. And in a way, I'm so glad that I didn't settle for being diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I'm sure in any regular circumstance, it would have helped significantly. But when I didn't experience any relief from doing all of that detox, I had to look at all the factors that were contributing to my illness. And if I don't work on eliminating what was harming me, I would be in a perpetual cycle of trying to heal and never actually getting to the point of thriving. I'm not okay with having a life sentence of symptoms that I'm just supposed to accept and take pharmaceuticals for. Every dis-ease or discomfort that we experience from our body is our body's way of communicating with us. And instead of listening to it and making lifestyle changes, we've made it okay to try to suppress and subdue it. So hopefully now that I've removed this from my body, all the things that I have been doing will help actually heal me, and I can go back to having the energy to do the things that I wanted to do. If you're wondering what you can do if you're experiencing adverse effects from your IUD, I've provided some links in the description so you can file an adverse report of your symptoms. And as far as birth control goes, catch me on my next video where I'll be talking about the natural form of birth control that I started using. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.